Hey everyone, welcome to the Citizens Advisory Podcast presented by the Citizens Advisory of Pennsylvania. I'm Jess Stahlnecker, Executive Director. I am here with our esteemed President, Ben Herring. Just a little note, I think this is kind of nostalgic, that we started this podcast roughly 1 year ago. And it was you and I, Ben. We recorded that first episode together, and I think it's fitting that you're back for our 30th episode. So that's a pretty big milestone, I think. And we are going to discuss the hottest topic in Luzerne County right now, which is the 2024 primary race. And the race that we're really focused on, obviously, is between our former president and co-founder, Jamie Walsh, and incumbent Mike Cabell in the 117th legislative district. Ben, welcome back. Thank you for being here. I cannot believe
Thank you for having me.
It's real life that we are almost 2 weeks post-primary and we are still waiting on final results. So I'm going to kind of hand it off to you. You can kind of give the people maybe a little update. We're going to talk a little bit about how this impacts election integrity in general and really like what the implications could be moving forward. So Ben, I'm going to kind of hand it off to you and you can tell everyone where we're at.
Yeah, thanks, Jess. It's hard to believe it's been a year since we started doing this. That time flies crazy. So in 2022, we got very involved with election integrity because we saw that there was such a need out there for not only Luzerne County folks, but across the entire Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. But of course, in our backyard, we need to make sure that's policed well. So we got very involved in 2022, and that really hasn't died down. I think we're only getting more and more involved with election integrity because it's needed. We really need, and this last 2 weeks, Jess, has shown us why it's so important to be involved in what happens in these elections. So if you have an interest in election integrity, especially in a swing state such as Pennsylvania, you need to be watching this podcast. You need to share this with your friends because this is important. Everything we're going to talk about is very important. So really it's twofold. And I think by, almost divine intervention, the Jamie Walsh versus Mike Cabell race for the 117th has really shined a huge spotlight on the issues that we're going to possibly deal with in November. So not only are we dealing with the short-term target of seeing what happens in this race, but whatever transpires here is going to set the stage for November. So there's a lot riding on this. There is a lot of important decisions that are going to come down, and we need to track all of them very closely. So just to give a quick update on the Walsh versus Cabell race, it is still a 4-vote lead for Jamie Walsh as it stands today on May 6th, 2024. There are two different things going on with this. So the Walsh campaign filed a suit because the Luzerne County Board of Elections approved 111 mail-in ballots with either missing or incorrect dates on the secrecy envelope, on the outer envelope. That has already been adjudicated by a court of law known as the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, which is kind of an important one.
It's a big deal.
That you don't count those ballots. And all the, some of the crazy people out there scream voter disenfranchisement. Oh my God, what are you guys doing? You can go to the PA Department of State website. It tells you must fill this out correctly or your vote won't be counted. It's extremely important to do things the right way. I almost said it the last 2 weeks. I was telling folks, if I'm going 75 miles an hour in my car and the speed limit's 60, when I get pulled over, do I just say, well, I'm sorry, my intent was to go, the speed limit. Things happen. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's not what America is. We're a nation of laws and we need to follow them.
Well, right. There's rules for a reason. It's like, I think I used this example with you, Ben, on when we were talking about this just one-on-one. As a former teacher, even like when we're getting our kids to fill out the Pennsylvania standardized testing, right? Like if you don't fully mark the bubble or if you don't do things correctly, like guess what? It doesn't count. It's wrong. And
right.
So I think that's where, we have to have hard and fast rules here. We can't have this gray area. So, I had to throw that in there because this is something that really is is something that should be common sense as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and I want to draw, I mean, there's so much importance to elections, right? With all of the issues that we deal with right now, whether it's the open border crisis, whether it's inflation at a 40-year high, I can name them for the next 5 minutes. I won't in the sake of time. The only way to fix those issues is to elect somebody else that's going to fix them. So it's statewide, it's local, it's national, it's everywhere. If our elections are not administered in a free and fair and legally accurate manner, then how do you fix those issues? So it's not, like you said, we're talking about children taking tests. The importance should be really, really a lot higher when you're putting a ballot out there that's going to determine the next elected official or officials, right?
Right.
So we're going to get more into that 111. That's going to be a topic we're going to talk about for a few minutes. But the second issue is that the provisional ballots have been counted. They've been challenged. There was 13 initial challenges. The Cabell campaign added one more to make it 14 provisionals that were challenged. The Walsh campaign is not going to appeal any of those, to my direct knowledge. However, there's 2 appeals that are going to come from the Cabell campaign. So again, Walsh is in court for the 111 mail-in ballots. Walsh is not challenging the provisionals. The Cabell campaign is challenging 2 provisionals. The one provisional, and I give some credit to the local media for actually covering this, is his cousin who lives in Schuylkill County. We're going to talk about that more. I won't bore everybody here at the beginning. And then the second one is now they want all the write-ins to count for this election. And it's a really interesting theory, right? So on the ballot, it says Jamie Walsh or Mike Cabell. Back to your thing with testing, right? Fill in the bubble.
Right.
They want to count now. If you went to the bottom and you didn't bother to look at the ballot to see that those 2 candidates were on there, now you can write it in. So I see Jamie Walsh and Mike Cabell, but I'm going to write in Mike Cabell. It defies any common sense or logic. And we don't even know if any of those, I think there's 22 in the county, if any of those even have this race on there. So to me, it's grasping at straws. It's throwing anything they can against the wall to see what sticks. But again, as we're going to talk about, this has consequences much bigger than the 117.
Truly. So let's kind of go back to, I mean, you were talking about the court cases. Can you talk a little bit about the court case and what they ruled on these mail-in ballots? So the ruling stated what, so that we can kind of have an idea of where this might go?
Yes, very good question. So let's start at the beginning. So this is probably one of the more important aspects that I think a lot of folks, especially in our area, are wondering how this works. So I did some homework, I did some research. I often joke around, I'm not a lawyer, I just know how to read. You just got to know how to read to figure these things out. So everybody in PA that cares about election integrity knows about Act 77. Act 77 was a horrible piece of legislation that got passed. Act 77 repealed a lot of things that the elected officials didn't want. The one thing they did not repeal from the election code was the requirement to have an accurate date on a mail-in ballot. That's important, right? So if you guys remember in 2020, the presidential election, mail-in ballots were accepted if they could find them in dumpsters and just pick them up. I mean, it was a free-for-all.
Mm-hmm.
It was a disaster. So some folks out of the Republican Party in the General Assembly went forward with lawsuits. They were part of lawsuits with other grassroots groups, things like that. Basically, this went all the way up to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court for sake of time, right? So they wanted to basically clarify what the language says. If the PA General Assembly has the authority to require those signatures and dates on those envelopes, and the Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruled on 3 different things, they would not touch the date requirement. And the way a lot of people read that, again, a lot of lawyers are going to tell you their opinion on it. Basically, in a nutshell, what it means is by them not touching it means the legislature, the plain text of the legislature stands. There's no challenge. They're not going to touch it, right? That's it. And it further got really clarified at the Third Circuit, which I'll get to in a second. But for the sake of this conversation, Jess, the PA Supreme Court states you need to have a properly marked mail-in ballot with an accurate date on it for it to count, right? Done. Simple stuff. Black and white.
And by
So
date, we're talking about month, day, and year.
correct. So yep,
I think that's important for later, right?
2-digit month,
Mhm.
two-digit date, 4-digit year. Now there is even some leeway, and especially myself as a military guy, we used to write, 07 MAR 2004. So we do our dates a little differently in the military. But if you even do that or use European time, it would still count. What you can't do is just throw in any arbitrary date out there.
Right.
That gets
We
into
just have a month and a day. You have to have a year.
you
Like,
have to have a month, a date, and a year. Again, common sense, general stuff. Adults should understand that, right? So what happened was the Pennsylvania Secretary of State, acting at the time, issued guidance. And this is where it gets tricky and this is where it gets ugly and political. Issued guidance saying, regardless of the PA Supreme Court ruling, we're going to issue our guidance to each different county. And if there is a misdated ballot, you should still count it. We've seen a lot over the last 3-4 years about just unlawful elected officials just saying to do whatever. They don't want to follow what's been given to them. This is a perfect example of that. This is somebody that just went outside the bounds of the law and said, nope, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that the court just ruled on this. You're still going to do what we say. So the interesting part of the Third Circuit case, let me get to that real quick. So after the Supreme Court case came down, the ACLU, all the different buzzword agencies, they went forward and said, this is against the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Basically, you're going to disenfranchise voters because they have to actually be adults and write a date on there. And they were trying to do it under the materiality clause of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Basically, the argument from them, but it's immaterial. If they don't have the date on there correctly, it doesn't matter, right? Because the post office is still going to ship it on this day, blah,
yeah.
blah, 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 blah. Again, for people like myself who really believes in election integrity, I want the rules followed so that there's no way of fraud being introduced, right? It doesn't mean the voter is a bad person or they have bad, ideas. It just means you eliminate more risk for fraud. So they took that forward to the Third Circuit. This is the one that was just ruled on recently. So this is the one a lot of people are talking about. And I actually want to read the actual language because I think it's important. You can't get any more clear, in my opinion, than what this language says. So, give me 1 second. I had it pulled up. Oh, there it is right here. All right. The Supreme Court of Pennsylvania ruled that dating the envelope is mandatory and undated or misdated ballots are invalid under its state law and must be set aside. They determined that the Civil Rights Act of 1964, it basically, you can't be denied the right to register to vote. Like I can't say, Jess, you can't vote because you're a girl, right? That's a clear discriminatory act. Nobody would allow that. But as long as you're registered and you have the ability to vote, that's where it ends.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're registered, Jess, you can vote. If you send in your mail ballot the wrong way or you don't follow the instructions, that has nothing to do with your civil rights.
No, that's
That
on
means
me
that,
as the
you messed
voter.
up.
Yeah.
So that was the Third Circuit opinion that came down that has also been referenced. So again, PA Supreme Court, date is required. Third Circuit, date is required. 2 courts, 1 federal, 1 state. Done, right? This should not be trivial. This should be slam dunk. We're done with it. But then we go to the Luzerne County Board of Elections, which I'm sure we're going to get to next. But the law is clear. It's not ambiguous. It's very clear.
So let's go to the update of where we are now. So we have these 111 mail-ins that are under court challenge currently. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why they were set aside is because they're misdated or there is no date on the envelope. Correct? Is that yes. So
correct.
When are they ruling on that? What's happening there?
Well, there was a hearing today on that one, and Luzerne County actually sent their solicitors there. And I'm surprised by this one. Nothing should surprise me. This one surprises me. The assistant solicitors are taxpayer funded lawyers working for the county, right? So again, since you've now heard the law in its very clear state, you would think the solicitors would point to everything I just pointed to and say, perhaps they shouldn't be counted. Who knows?
Right.
Well, they went in there and they actually argued against the Walsh campaign that he filed this briefing too late, or really the way I read it, my personal opinion, is these folks are trying to find any kind of loophole or trickiness to mess with these campaigns. I mean, it seems wild what's going on right now. The Walsh campaign, in my opinion, in my estimation, is 100% accurate with these 111 mail-in ballots should not count. They don't have the dates either on there, or they're wrong dates, or they're outside of the window that it's allowable. So
Right.
everything I just read to you applies, right?
Right.
So why would a county use taxpayer funds to fight a candidate who is just saying do the right thing?
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense.
It makes no sense. It makes no sense.
It's well past the logic test here. So they're trying to say it was not filed accurately, or excuse me, timely. I think the Walsh campaign has a really, really good argument. They're going to win this one because when you're talking adjudication of these votes right now, these ballots, it's still an open meeting. They started, last Friday or something, and every day they've recessed, but the meeting is not over yet. So there's going to be a lot of legal, arm wrestling going on. And like I said, people are going to be throwing anything they can against the wall. You're going to see motives come out to see what people are really trying to do and why. It's not going to be law related. It's going to be agenda related.
Yeah. So my question is, when does this all have to be finalized? Because it seems like there's a lot of things that have to happen before we are going to even know the results of this election. I mean, we're separated by 4 votes right now. Mm-hmm. So that we've got a 4 vote gap that, this can really technically go either way. When does this election have to be finalized, and how quickly are they going to be able to adjudicate all of this stuff?
Well, this is one of those situations where I believe that past practice is going to come back to haunt certain folks that have agendas. Because if you remember back in 2022, Papergate, the Luzerne County Board of Elections did not certify on certification day, and they were threatened with lawsuits from candidates who had some votes in question due to the Papergate situation. So if the rule is going to be to file a lawsuit immediately after the certification doesn't go through, then we're talking the 13th of May. So we're talking, a week, just over a week, right?
Yeah.
To where this should go on. So
about a week from today, actually. It's a week from today.
It's a week from today, yeah. From today. So if they don't certify on the 13th, then if I was advising, I would advise the Walsh campaign to go ahead and file a lawsuit, because apparently that's what happens now. Now, I would think as a citizen that the election board should really consider all of the facts and circumstances before certifying an election. A logical person would think that, but apparently that's not how it works. If you don't certify the date you're required to, lawsuits come flying out. So I guess that's what's going to happen. We should know by the 13th, though. And I will say this, though. I think that the judges that heard the hearing today, I mean, the lawsuit was filed last week and a hearing happened today. So I will give some, credence to the judicial side of things. I think they understand the importance of getting this done.
Yeah, because that's pretty timely, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty quick.
I would say so.
Yeah. Yep. All right. So let's talk about this provisional ballot with Mike Cabell's cousin. Let's talk about this one.
This is wild. Yeah.
This is crazy. This is another situation, right, where we're not going to know anything because there's a separate hearing for this. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay.
So right now, if the Luzerne County Board of Elections voted on Friday last week to reject all 13 challenges from either the Walsh or the Cabell campaign.
Right.
So any candidate was able to lodge a challenge to any of the provisional ballots. Well, there was 13 total challenges. So then they set up a hearing on Friday. Public was allowed to go to it, but it was set up like a court hearing. right? So they heard the arguments from both attorneys, and then they decided in kind of crazy fashion, nothing's bipartisan anymore, but they all voted unanimously on every challenge to reject it. So they threw away all 13 challenges from the candidates and their attorneys. But the Cabell campaign introduced one new challenge, and that was already a previously rejected ballot from Mike Cabell's cousin. So rightfully so, the Walsh campaign said, well, I think there obviously is an interest in the Cabell campaign trying to push for this ballot to be counted because it's his cousin, and clearly it's a vote for Mike Cabell. The crazy part, again, I hate to keep going back to common sense, Jess, but it seems like we need to start applying that more and more these days.
Yeah.
This guy bought a house in Schuylkill County in December of 2023, updated his registration for his vehicle, which automatically triggers the SURE system, which is the election database for Pennsylvania, probably a lot of other states. And it said, okay, this person's no longer living in Missouri County; he's living in Schuylkill County. So now he would get the mail, and all the verification stuff would go to his house saying, you are now going to vote in Schuylkill County because
Right.
your car's registered there. You have a house there. That's clearly where you live.
Mm-hmm.
But what they're trying to argue, again, this crazy, insane, stick it against the wall legal theory of, well, he had stuff in that house. We don't know if his wife's living in that house. We don't know if his kids are living in that house. But he didn't really move until I think they said March 29th or 28th. And what March 29th or 28th is, if you remember, the the election was April 23rd.
Right.
So you have, by law in Pennsylvania, 30 days to change, where you live legally. So go figure, it was 6 days within the window of
Right.
where he
Just by
legally lives.
chance. Just by chance.
Just by chance, right? Just
Yeah.
by chance. So my opinion, once again, I think that he looked for a loophole to be able to come back and make sure his cousin got one of his votes. Excuse me, got his vote. I shouldn't say one of his votes. And he chose, even though he lives there, to come vote here. Rightfully, it was thrown away by the election board. I give him credit for doing that.
Yep.
But they're challenging that. So they have until COB Monday, COB today, to appeal that. And if they appeal that, that has to now go to another court hearing. So we could potentially have 2 Court of Common Pleas hearings going on, one over the 111 mail-in ballots and one over this challenge, and potentially another challenge if he's going to go forward with the write-in votes, the Cabell campaign, which I don't know. I just heard about it today. I think that's wild that you would waste resources and money on that, but
I think so
this
too.
what these
and I also
they're in desperation mode, Jess.
I know they are. And I I understand, like, you want to win, whatever, but like do they not understand like the implications that this has even in November? Like if they fight these things now, right? I mean, what happens in November when it's, a huge election, a presidential election? Are we
right?
They're going to obviously take the opposite stance if, we don't want mail-ins counted that aren't done correctly. Like there is just so much that could go wrong there. And so I am actually surprised by the campaign, or by the campaign, the Cabell campaign, that they're even going to move forward with this. I understand that it's coming down to just a few votes. But this is a really bad look for the, establishment that's in office now. I just think it's a bad look. I don't know. And honestly too, I think every single day how much these campaigns are paying their attorneys to continue. And you've got someone like Cabell, who is again part of an established political group, and I'm sure he's receiving funds. And you have Jamie Walsh, who, is basically like on his own, running as a citizen candidate, right? And so I just think that it's really kind of a shame that it's all coming to this. I think that it's showing us a lot of what people's characters are. And I think that, I would love for you to just talk about some of the consequences and why it's so important to preserve election integrity, because we've got a huge, we really do. We have a huge election coming up in November. Our country is in shambles. So, if we can't freely elect the people that we think can make change for good in this country, then we're in trouble. So, I would just love for you to talk on that just a little bit.
Absolutely. And I want to point out one thing too that I don't think I've stressed enough either, which is the 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 court opinions that we already recited today, whether it was the Supreme Court or the Third Circuit, they were known to the Luzerne County Board of Elections during all of these different,
Yes. And
meetings. Yeah.
right. And I just want to say too, those court cases were known, and this adjudication process is not foreign to them. They know, because this happens every election. I think it's important to stress to our audience that this adjudication process happens every single election. We're just paying close attention because the election is so tight. Normally, by the time they do this adjudication, the race is run or is won. We don't it's not in play anymore, right? The candidate,
Right.
those votes don't matter. These votes matter, so we're paying close attention, but this process is not something that's foreign to any of these people on the election board.
No, they do this every single year. And the really discouraging part for me is there's two attorneys, again, the solicitors for Luzerne County, when they're getting into a decision point where they think it might be, well, for obviously it's consequential, but it could rely on kind of a legal backing. The solicitors told them about the Third Circuit. And in fact, one of the board members, she actually recited verbatim some of the language of the court, and they still voted to accept those 111 mail-in votes. So yes, you are spot on. You have a grassroots regular guy like Jamie Walsh who has to spend $5,000 a day in legal fees because a board of elections is operating outside of their authority. They think this is their authority, but here's another little nugget for everybody. In that Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruling, all 67 counties boards of elections were listed as defendants. So they can't say they don't know about this. If they have an attorney worth any much of a what, they were listed in that paperwork. So they should have gotten that decision because they were a defendant on the case. Okay. You can't claim ignorance. You can't claim you didn't know about it. It's right in front of your face. So the Supreme Court case should have been recited to this county, and they should have rejected the 111 mail-in votes. If they did that, the Walsh campaign would not have to appeal that or file a lawsuit to compel them to follow the law. This is what drives me absolutely crazy.
Unbelievable. Like I keep saying, like, I can't believe this is real life. Like these gray areas and this, like, laws are not up for discussion or interpretation, right? Like the interpretation was cast down by the courts. So we know what the interpretation
two courts,
is.
a state court and a federal court. And in the state court, all the board of elections of every county in Pennsylvania was on there. This is what I don't understand. So, I mean, I'm not even gonna go there. I mean, Walsh is going to have some options because what these people are doing is criminal. The Luzerne County Board of Elections is a joke. They are a complete joke. They should have rejected these 111 mail-in ballots, but here we are. Walsh has to go forward with that, right? So here's what's consequential about that. And I'm sure this is going to come across backwards. But if you're looking at that, that says precedential.
Forwards. It's forward.
Okay, good. It's only backwards to me. It says precedential, right? Means precedent setting. The Third Circuit Court of Appeals case is precedent setting. What does that mean? If you fall in the geography of the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, you now follow that rule. If the ACLU and some of these other groups want to appeal this ruling to the United States Supreme Court and they lose there, it's nationwide binding. It's precedential. That means no mail-in ballots without the proper date on it, if that's in those states' constitution or their election laws, can be violated because now it's a federal order. It's from the Supreme Court. So that's why I don't know if the Third Circuit opinion will be appealed. The Pennsylvania one is already, you can't go any further than the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. So that's already been
Yeah.
decided. But here's to get back to your question. Sorry for rambling. Here's where it's consequential. The Cabell campaign, they care more about Mike trying to get reelected. And they're going to undermine all of the election integrity efforts that have been going on since 2020, really, since the presidential election.
Yeah.
Because if they run this through the Luzerne County Court of Common Pleas, let's say they get a ruling saying, you know what, you're right, mail-in ballots should count, even without the right date on it. That's going to force a challenge to the Commonwealth Court. It's going to go through the same cycle again. And let's just say, just for fun, they all say, you know what, these mail-in ballots don't need to be dated properly. All that election integrity, you know, gain that has been, you know, seen over the last 2 years gets thrown away. So he can make, so now if you got people that want to do nefarious things, people that are looking to throw in mail-in ballots from whoever, you just made it easier for them. So you've erased a lot of election integrity efforts.
Right. And yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem like he's out for the good of the order at all. He's out for the good of himself. And that's just,
Yep.
it's
So
disappointing.
it's not even collateral damage, Jess. I mean, it's much worse than that. It is literally going to be damaging. If he even runs this through the court system, it's going to cost money, time. They're going to cast doubt on voters.
Mhm.
And then again, if they get certain rulings and they cause more confusion, so let me say this: the Department of State. This was brought up during the Luzerne County Board of Elections meeting recently with the Walsh campaign, Walsh and Cabell campaigns. The chairwoman Denise Williams said, "Well, I have here the Pennsylvania Department of State guidance, right?" So she's quoting guidance,
Right.
even though she already heard about the laws from the solicitors. She's stating guidance. Now, that guidance has gotten the Department of State sued many times because their guidance conflicts with the law. They're still using that even after the PA Supreme Court ruling, where it even said part of the remedy of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruling was to remove that guidance that was not consistent with the law. But they're still doing it. Come November, the PA Department of State is going to issue guidance that is inconsistent with what we're seeing. They do it all the time. They don't care.
Right.
So the more doubt you cast on each county, to include Luzerne County, due to the Cabell campaign, the more voters are not going to know if it's right or not to do it. They're going to go do it. You know what I mean? So I mean, it's bad all around. They need to pull their team out tomorrow. Get them out.
And honestly, too, like you're talking about casting doubt, but like it really discourages people from even voting at all. After something like this, if we see, you know, the result of this is undermining all of the laws that have been put in place, people are they're not gonna bother to vote. And I mean, that's the end of our country as we know it. It's the end. So we can't get voters to come out because they don't have any faith in elections. That's a sad situation. So it has huge implications moving forward. And of course, you know, if there are any updates, we will certainly keep you posted. And I'm even thinking that, you know, once this is all settled, we can do another podcast to just kind of, you know, update everyone. But I really appreciate all of your insight and all of your research. And I know you and I were at the hearings, but you've been at a few of the hearings, you know, and so we've kind of had a firsthand look at the processes. So we have a lot of kind of initiatives that we're going to be taking to move forward with election integrity in mind. So I appreciate it, Ben. Thanks for being here. Go ahead.
One big one too is just to kind of throw it out there now. We're going to be looking at June timeframe, which isn't far away. We're going to hold a seminar. We're going to get some of the leaders across Pennsylvania that have been really in the trenches with election integrity. So stay tuned for that. But no doubt, everything we've seen over the last few years, we got to put it together. The 2024 election, and I know people have heard this before, but this is no joke. It's the most consequential election of our lifetime. And we have to make sure election integrity is at the forefront of everything we do. So we're really going to ramp up our efforts at Citizens Advisory of Pennsylvania, and we're going to put on a seminar here in the next 45 days. So more to come on that. But thank you, Jess.
Yes, thank you. So just a reminder, if you're enjoying these podcasts, please subscribe to our channel. Please share the podcast, especially this one, far and wide. Anybody that you know, especially in the 117th, that needs to know the updates and what is going on kind of in detail, share this. We're available anywhere you get your podcasts. So Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music. And if you need any kind of resources or you want to get involved in our organization, please visit our website, citizensadvisorypa.com. We also have a Facebook page, Citizens Advisory of PA. You can search us there, and Twitter, right? Citizens Advisory of PA.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. And we will update you as soon as we can. Bye, guys.